Alright, so during this video, if you're following this on your own on YouTube and you just want to quickly get right to what are some potential issues and how to fix them, that's what we're going to talk about during the first part of the video. So any issues that you might be having, what I'll do is I'll show you how to problem solve and fix those. And then for those of you who are taking my class, what we're going to do for the second half of the video is we're going to go ahead and finalize our block slopers. We're going to turn them into oak tag and get all of our markings and drill holes on here. Alright, so let's talk about the changes that I want to do for this pant draft for this dress form. Now for me, first and foremost, one of the most obvious things is down here at the crotch level, the side seam has too much volume. And mostly that just comes back to when I was doing my shaping with the variform curve and coming down into the knee level, that I can come back in here and it doesn't need to be as curvy. I can actually make it a little bit straighter because she's a smaller size 6 girl and she's just got kind of these really thin legs. So I can get rid of some of this extra curve here that she doesn't need. Something else I want to do is here in the back, it's a little bit too loose. At first it's tempting that you want to just take the back and start to just tighten that up. But what's going to happen is these back darts are going to start tilting inwards, and as you come down here, you're going to start getting these weird pulls on here. So realistically, the solution is leave the back alone, and we're going to just take a little tiny eighth off of each of the darts, and that's going to smooth out this whole area here and keep that really nice shaping that we already have here at the full hip. I'm going to make a few changes to this, and I'm going to do it one at a time. I've noticed in the past where I'll have a list of changes I want to do, so maybe there's 3 different things I want to change out of this. And I'll go and I'll change all 3 things and come back and do a fitting, and all of a sudden now there's problems somewhere else. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to do the change, do a fitting, do a different change, do a fitting, and continuously be checking it as you go. I don't want to mess up the shaping here in her hip, at the full hip back in this area, and I like the volume that she has here for her belly, so I don't want to mess up any of this. And you might notice, like, I might get rid of a little bit of this excess here in the hip and come back in and make these back darts just a little bigger, and then all of a sudden I love the fit up here in the full hip. So let's go ahead and just do some changes one at a time to start. Alright, so let's take this pair of pants here, and what we're going to do is I'm going to turn them inside out so I can get access to the side seams. And I want to fix that hip shaping on the side seam. And the first thing I need to do is, since it's all butterflied pressed open, I need to get this back to being flat so we can come in here and draw on this with our pencil and our variform curve. Now as I come in here to press the seam back to being flat, I want to make sure on both sides that I don't have any areas where maybe there's a little crease or fold. So you should be able to see your stitching the full distance on both sides. Okay, so now that I've flattened out my seam allowance, I can come back in and let's compare this back to the original draft. Now I really like the shaping up here in the waist and along her hip, all up in the high hip area down to the full hip. And then the bubble that we're experiencing is here. It's at that crotch level. There's a little bit too much extra fabric here. Now if you recall from the draft, after we established our ankles, we drew a line coming all the way back up here to the crotch level. Just a nice clean straight line. And then the side seam transitioned to going straight with the grain, and then eventually it started to curve back into the waist. And that's where we came up with the curve for up in this area. If I start to slide this curve down, and we can see kind of this bubble area right here that we didn't like, we can find a transition point where if we're going to blend back into our original hip level and come back into here, and we don't want to change anything going below the knee. So you have to come back to 0 at the knee level. If you're going to change it below the knee, we have to balance both sides of the knee. So now we have to change the side seam and the inseam and the front and the back. So ideally, let's not do that right now. That's going to get a little bit too involved. Now what you want to do is, whatever change you're going to do to your muslin mock-up, you need to have the same change here on your pattern pieces. So here's where we blend it up into the waist area. And what you would do is you would take the same variform curve and bring it down here to where we can go from the hip level line and start to blend it heading back towards the knee, just trimming a little bit of this off of here. So now you can see I've taken away a little bit of that weird corner, and it's a smooth curve going from the knee past the crotch level and right up to the original hip level. And you want to draw on the muslin because I'm about to take all these stitches out, and then I need to remember to re-stitch along there, and I need to ignore this half-inch seam allowance because I'm just going to leave it alone. So let's do this fix to both sides of our pants. We'll sew it up, press this open, and we'll do another test fit back to our dress form. So what I've done here is I've put a pin where I wanted to start and where I want to stop. 2 more pins in the middle along this pencil line. And then I went through and I popped about every 4th or 5th stitch. Now I can come down here to the opposite side. And we can pull the stitch all the way through down to the stopping point. And then when I come back to this side, now you're looking at the original stitch, which turns into the pencil line, and then back to the original stitch. Back here on my sewing machine, I just want to check, make sure that the tensions are good. Make sure your stitches are back to 12 stitches per inch. And then here under the sewing machine, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a good inch before the thread stops so I can overlap my stitches without having to do a back tack. Hold your threads to the back and go ahead and stitch this without a back tack. Now we have to be really careful. We're following the pencil line and ignoring the old seam allowance. Once you get to the end, you'll want to stitch a good inch over the good stitches. And you don't need to do any back tacks. Now back here on the tabletop, we could take these pins out and just double check that the tension was okay on both sides. If anything's weird, you can always relax the tension back out. And check both of them. Make sure they're both exactly the same so you're getting the same results. And then what we'll do is we'll go back to the ironing board and we'll press the seam butterfly open again. I want to finger press it all the way down to those threads so I can see that blue threads in here. And then we can press it, steam it, and of course let it cool off for 10 seconds. And again, I want to finger press this at first, make sure I'm getting all the way down to each blue stitch. We'll press it, steam it, let it cool off, and then we'll do the same thing for the other leg. At this stage, I've turned them right side out, and then I'm repressing them to where I have the crease on the front and the back, and getting the inseam and the side seams totally flat and clean. Alright, these look good. Let's go back to the dress form and try these on. Okay, so now we come back in to check along the side seam. Again, it fits great all up in this area. And then we trimmed away a little bit of that extra poof it had off to the side. Basically for me, for sure, I would make the hip circumference a little bit less. I would take off easily 1/2 of an inch total. And then that would also bring back the crotch level line, and where they met out here on the side seam, it would push everything in just a little more. And I'd probably make the ankle circumference 13.5, so I could take a 1/4 inch off of all 4 sides. And then that whole line coming up into here would still trim just a little bit more off of there, and a little less puff right here in this area. But you get a good idea now of how to come in and fix some shaping for the hips on the side seam here. And you'll notice, obviously, with all your different clients that the widest part of their body will be in different locations according to that person. Let's come back here and let's talk about the other fix I want to do. So here in the back waist, there's a little bit too much room. And let's take a closer look at that. So like I was saying from before, the waist here is a little bit loose. The front waist fits great, the side seams fit great. So I don't want to mess anything up. So I have it pinned here at both side seams, and now I can come in here and figure out what we need to do for the back. Also, when I look at the full hip area, this is fitting perfect right along this area on both sides. So we don't need to change the length of the darts or anything like that. I also don't want to mess up the crotch curve that we have going here and into her lower back. So like I said before, it's tempting to come in here and just pinch off some of this lower back and then have a smooth fit the whole way. But the downside is you start getting tension going through your pants, as well as the darts now start to slope in, and you would have to reshape the top of the waistline. Now if I pin this exactly where it should be, center back at the waist level, I can see that it's actually really smooth and clean and fits great all in this area, so I don't want to mess that up. So realistically, all we need to do is fix these darts. Now the stitch line that we're seeing here, this is that stay stitch we put in, 1/2 inch. What we need to do is we want to clip it at the dart folds, so then we can get the darts to come out and we can pin them for the amount that we want. And so now you can see this is why we sew our darts coming to the outside when we're doing a mock-up fitting, so we can come in here and fold the darts more and get a good sense of how much more you need to take out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just start taking in small amounts, and ultimately you want to do the same amount for all 4 of them. Now what I've taken in here is approximately a 1/16 of an inch from all 4 of them. Now if you feel like you can't grab enough to get in and pin to take a larger amount, at that point you're actually trying to take too much. Because don't forget, she still needs to move around, she needs to sit down, stand up, walk, breathe, eat food, and you don't want to have it too tight. So make sure you're not pulling on center front. This should just be laying totally clean and even. All of these darts should look nice and smooth, and you're not affecting it at the side seams. So only pin as much as you can pin comfortably, and then beyond that you just don't want to take too much. So basically what we need to do is I want to take off a 1/16 from all 4 of these, and there's still a little extra room heading below these, and just ignore that, because once we make a wider dart leg coming back to 0 here and here, it's going to also soak up some of that extra fabric. What I want to do is I'm going to keep working on these darts from the front side of this, but it's easier to have it flat on the tabletop like this. So what I'm going to do is turn my pants inside out, and now it'll be easier to get access to my darts, have it flat on the tabletop, and it's right side up. Now that I'm down here on the tabletop looking at my ruler and my darts, and I'm realizing when I was pinning those, I was actually pinning more like 1/8. So I want to add 1/8 to both sides of all 4 darts. Another thing I want to do is, I can see the stitches here from the old dart, and I want to keep track of right where those dart legs are hitting at the seam. So I'm going to put a pencil line here, right where that seam should be. And that's going to represent the seam right here from your pattern. So for instance, if I measure the width of the dart, I don't care what it is out here in the seam allowance, I care what it is right along that seam. So basically they're 6/16 wide. So I want to make sure that I'm getting exactly 6/16 of an inch is the original dart. And I can see the little holes from when I've already sewn. But I just want to double check that everything was super accurate. So then when I come back and I start to add 1/8 of an inch to both sides of the dart, I know that I'm getting it perfect. And then of course I want to go back to 0 at the dart tip. So now taking a closer look at this, you can see here's the original seam line, this is my original dart legs, and I'm going 1/8 out on both sides and back to 0 here at the dart tip. And I'm going to continue doing that now for all 4 of these dart legs. So now I've pinned all of them, and you can see I've pinned right through the pencil line on this side, and then it matches perfect right on the pencil line through that side. So I know when I'm stitching it, I'm sewing exactly right on top of the pencil. And I did the same thing here, about halfway along the dart, and then I have a pin to mark where the dart starts. Again, when you're sewing your darts, you'll do 12 stitches per inch. You want to start with your thread long, leave it long so you can tie it in 3 knots when we're all done. Always start in the middle of the fabric and work your way to the edges. And you're going to want to start without a back tack, right at the dart tip, right along the edge of the fabric. Once you have your needle in place, you can take this pin out. And your first 3 stitches are just going to be straight along the edge of the fabric, and then you'll continue following the dart leg. So to the end without any back tacks, and then later on we'll go through and we'll tie all of these into 3 knots. And of course, the same as before, we need to finger press these towards center back, and then we'll come back and we'll stay stitch the waistline. And then I can come back here and press them on the ironing board, let them cool off, and also trim any extra threads down to 1/2 inch. And now I'm just putting it back onto a ham and getting some of that shaping back before we do a fitting back with our client. Okay, so these pants are already looking better and better. At this stage now, I only have it pinned right here at center front. Everything else is just resting right on the waist, right where it should be. And I can see it's starting to lose a little more volume here after adjusting the side seam and taking in this back waist a little more. I still think I would just make that full hip measurement just a little bit shorter, and down here at the ankles as well, just a little bit smaller for this particular client. Going along the side seams here, I think we could, when we go to the patterns and fix the patterns, I think we can fix that curve one more time and just trim just a little bit more out of that. And then up here in the back waist, everything fits beautifully. It's a titch tight, a little bit tighter than what I want. But keep in mind that realistically, your waistband is going to be somewhere down here. So you want to know, well, how tight is it in this area? So even though it's kind of tight up here in the waist, I'm never going to actually use that seam. So down here where the darts are, this feels great. So if there was a waistband going across here and that was the ease we had, done. So I'm not going to touch that. So now with the changes that we made here to the side seam as well as the back darts, what I'm going to do is we'll go back to the tabletop and I'll show you how to make those changes on your pattern pieces now. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm getting ready to do my final changes to my basic block slopers based on the fittings that we've done and all the sample sewing corrections that we made. What I've done is I taped my front down to the tabletop and then I lined up my back so it is totally parallel at the hip level and the knee level. And then of course I taped this one to the tabletop. So for my changes, the biggest change is for me on this side seam. I still want to get that original change that I just did, and I want to just take off a little bit more as well. Now when I brought my vary curve into here and I lined it up with that 11 3/8 with this red mark, 23.5 at that red mark, so I can come back here and I can get my original location. So this is exactly what I did with the sewing machine. And as I'm doing a test fit, I feel like I could still take some more off of here. Now the thing is, if you want to take some off going below the knee level, whatever change you make here, you have to make here, and then of course you have to make it here and there as well. So it's kind of a lot of work just to make that one simple change. But let's go ahead and do that together now. So watch what I'm going to do here is, so if you recall, we went from the ankle all the way back up to the crotch level line with a straight line. Now if I want to get this to blend a little bit better, I want that same location at the ankle coming up into here to find what's going to be my new blend. Now I already know that I love the side seam here going above the hip level. So basically I'm trying to find something that comes back to 0 right around this hip level area. So I think I'm going to keep this here. So I'm going to draw this lightly in pencil so I can still erase it before I make it red. So I'm going to change this now. This was 12. My 12-inch mark is hitting right at the hip level. And then this ruler was guiding it back to 0 at the ankle. So whatever change I did here, I can come back and I can see now I'm just trimming a little bit off the whole way, which looking at my muslin mock-up, that's what this needed. So I'm going to start erasing my old line. And if you need to, you can also draw this in red color pencil so you know that that's your new correction. But just keep in mind that color pencil is really difficult to erase. So for me, I pretty much can see where my changes are. So I think I'm fine just doing it with pencil. Now what we need to do is we need to mirror this exactly onto the back. So if I have my variform curve here, number 12 at the hip level, I need to flip this over. So I'm keeping my hip curve right here, number 12, hip level. And then I'll come back into here and I'm matching this back up to 0 down here at the ankle. So now my change to the side seam from the front is the exact same change to the side seam of the back. And then the distance of a change that we did here at the knee has to be the exact same on this side as well. Now down here where the side seams are coming across the knee level, I can see that I'm trimming off exactly 1/8 of an inch right here, and then of course same thing on this side. Now since I'm trimming off 1/8 right here, I need to follow along the knee level to the inseam. So this was our inseam. And I need to trim off 1/8 here and blend this back into the inseam. So now I've trimmed away 1/8 here at the knee level. And I can double check that the measurement from here back to the grain is the same measurement from the grain out to here. So it's perfectly symmetrical at the knee level. Now I know that this location is going to blend straight back into 0 down here at the ankle. And then we want to blend back to 0 here at the crotch. And you should notice that most of the change here is barely anything. It's just a tiny, tiny little sliver. And then it comes down to this 1/8 here. Now the change that we did here, we need to do it here for the back. So down here on the back inseam, I'm going to go ahead and erase it. So here we need to trim away 1/8 at the knee level. And this is going to go back to 0 at the ankle. And as I pull this away and I look at my old line, it should just be this little tiny sliver of a change all up in this area. And then we come down to hit that 1/8 that we trimmed off. And now I'll come in and I'll double check this. So I'll measure from the inseam to the grain line, and it should be the same measurement from the grain line to the side seam. So taking a second look, basically what we've done is we've got rid of that bump that she had going below her hip level. And then because her legs are a little more narrow, basically we've just trimmed a little bit off going all the way back to the ankle here on the inseam as well as the back. And we know that the side seams are perfectly mirrored, and we know that from the knee level down it's perfectly mirrored for the front and for the back. And then we blended back to 0 here at the crotch and 0 here at the crotch for both of the inseams. Now the last changes on the back, we took off that one, or we added 1 more eighth to the dart. So I'm going to erase these really well, and I'm going to redraw my new darts, and then we need to fold this and true it up again. Now what I've done is I drew in my new darts and folded them together so I could tape them here to the side seam, and I also folded the front darts closed. And I want to check this waistline one last time now that we changed the darts here in the back. And eventually I'm going to turn this into slopers, and I'm going to cut these out on oak tag. So at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and cut off all the seam allowance and get the shaping for all of my dart tips. So at this point, I'm totally done making all the adjustments here to my block slopers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and press this so this will get nice and flat, and then I'm going to put these onto oak tag paper. And for those of you who are working at home, you're not going to have oak tag paper that's big enough for a pair of pants. But what I'll recommend is keep these paper patterns, obviously, because you've made them perfect, and hopefully they fit back to you. And what you can do is you can make a block sloper from a pair of shorts and the skirt, and you'll use that more often. And then whenever you need to come back to draft some pants, you can just start from using these paper patterns. Okay, so I've already transferred mine over to oak tag paper, and I have everything stapled down. What you want to do on your paper patterns is cut off all the seam allowances, but keep the mock fly seam allowance that we've already developed. So keep that for now. And then if you are going to transfer to oak tag, go ahead and do that now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start getting all of our level lines and our notches and drill holes. Okay, so now that you've cut off all of your seam allowance except for keeping this mock fly seam allowance, let's start to get all of our markings on our pattern pieces. Let's start with here with our front pattern piece. Okay, starting from the top, what we're going to do is we're going to take out our blue pencil, our notcher, and our drill hole maker. So go ahead and notch the dart legs, circle your dart tip, and put a drill hole through there. Down here at the hip level line, let's draw this in blue. And then right here where we made a square for the zip stop, let's turn that into a drill hole. And then we'll put a notch over here at the side seam. Let's come down here to the center front. Now this whole line right here is center front. Let's make that in blue. And do this from the top of the pattern all the way down to the knee level. Now on this pattern piece, so far during the demo, I was just had you writing CF for center front, but let's go ahead and here where we've labeled it, let's go ahead and write below here the words center front and use a ruler to connect that to the center front. Now remember, center front goes all the way up to here, so I'm going to just leave this, it says CF right here, I'm just going to leave that there. So come on down to your knee level line and let's make that in blue. And then we'll put a notch here at the inseam as well as the side seam. Okay, so sharpen your blue pencil some more. What we're going to do is we're going to get the grain line going the full pattern piece. Now something that we want to do that's going to be unique to your pants is at some point you can use this to make a skirt block and you don't need all this extra crotch inseam and the mock fly and everything. So along this center front we already have a drill hole here at the hip level. Let's come down here and get a drill hole at the knee level. You're also going to want to be able to draw a really accurate grain line all the way through your pattern piece. So I like to have a drill hole on the grain line at the knee level, as well as the grain line at the hip level. Now one last thing you're going to need for your front is follow the center front all the way up here to the waist, and let's get this notch right here. Now, since we're going to keep this mock fly seam allowance on here, you might want to know where this curve is in case if we come back and we sew a pair of pants and there's no zipper in the front. So what we can do is right at the 45-degree angle where this curve is crossing over, we can put a drill hole right there. And then down here along the inseam, we could put a notch. So now if you want to use this sloper and not have the extra seam allowance for the mock fly, you can always come in and you have your notch, your drill hole, and another drill hole, and you'll use those to blend the French curve right back into center front. Now let's also put some circles around those new drill holes. So here at the hip level and the grain line, we did a drill hole. And following the grain line all the way down to the knee level, and following center front down to the knee level. This one right here is a square because we're showing that that's a zipper stop. And then there's the new one right here for if you're going to use this curve instead of the seam allowance. So let's do the same thing here with the back. You want to have your notch for your dart legs, circle your dart tips, and put your drill holes there. Then the hip level, color it blue. And we're going to want a notch here at center back and a notch here at the side seam. Come down to your knee level and make that blue. And then put a notch here at the inseam and a notch here at the side seam. For the grain, make it blue the whole distance of your pattern piece. And then following the grain, we did a drill hole right here at the hip level and circled it. And we did another drill hole down here at the knee level and circled it. And then coming over to your center back, go ahead and color that in blue. And then following the center back, we had a drill hole right here at the knee level and circled that. And following the center back, we had a drill hole here at the hip level and circle that. Our center back is already labeled from when we did the previous video demonstration. And then the line here connects to center back, and also it goes over here to the edge of the pattern piece, because this is where center back is no longer following a straight line and it's curving in. So don't forget to keep that. So when you look at the back, basically you should have 2 notches at the hip level, and there's 2 drill holes going through it. Same thing, there's 2 notches here at the knee level and 2 different drill holes going through that. You have 2 drill holes for your darts and your dart leg notches. And let's double check on the front. So on the front, you have the hip level, there's a notch at the side seam, 2 drill holes. Down here at the knee level, we have a notch at the side seam and inseam and 2 drill holes. We have the drill holes for the dart tips and notches for the dart legs. And then on the center front, we also had the notch for center front, the notch for the inseam, which would be the center front without seam allowance, and then a drill hole here to follow that curve, and this drill hole here was for the zip stop. Now if you're following this video as part of the class, to take a photo of the whole entire pattern piece is actually really difficult. But what you can do is come in here and take a photo of the upper half of your front and back, and then we'll take a second photo down here going from the knee level down to the ankle level. Alright, so let's go back over to our dress form and we'll finish reviewing our final mock-up, and then we'll also talk about some other videos that follow after this. Alright, so that's the basics for your pant sloper block. Keep in mind that if you want to make some denim jeans, that there's adjustments you would do to this block. So you would always start with this block, make it fit perfect to your client, and then from this we'll go and we'll make some jeans. So that'll be another video on how to do that. And then I'm going to have a couple other videos. Pockets, so we'll learn to do a side seam pocket as well as the pocket bag, and then also having a Western style pocket, and then a patch pocket here for the back. There's going to be another series of videos for when you're ready to start making waistbands, as well as doing like a yoke in the back and taking some of these darts away or turning them into just a small dart. So we'll do waistbands, pockets, and then eventually there will be some video series as well for taking the same block, turn it into skirts, and then from that skirt block doing skirt variations.